The garden erupted in laughter, but Rosalyn Thornwell wasn't laughing anymore. "I swear it. I'll marry the very next man who walks through that gate." The words had barely left her mouth when the iron hinges groaned. The crowd fell silent. Through the archway stepped a figure dressed in black, his face carved from stone, his reputation darker than his coat. Duke Ashford Grimwood, the man who'd buried 2 fiancées and felt nothing, the man no woman dared approach. He stopped. Their eyes met. "Then we have an agreement, Miss Thornwell." Her lungs forgot how to breathe. What started as a joke, a desperate, reckless joke to escape her suffocating life, had just become a binding proposition with the most dangerous man in England. And he wasn't smiling. If you're watching from London, Paris, New York, or anywhere across this world, stay until the end. Drop a like, leave a comment telling me what city you're in, because I want to see just how far this story can travel. The morning had started like every other morning in the Thornwell household, badly. Rosalyn sat at the breakfast table, her posture perfect, her expression blank, while her mother's voice cut through the air like a dull blade that had been sharpened too many times. "You're 24, Rosalyn. 24. Do you understand what that means?" "It means I've survived another year," Rosalyn said quietly. Her mother's teacup hit the saucer with a sharp clink. "It means you're running out of time. Lord Pemberton has expressed interest. Lord Pemberton is 63. He's financially stable. He smells like wet wool and talks to his dogs more than to people." "Then perhaps you should have been more charming to Lord Ashby last season, or the season before that, or any of the dozen men who've shown you even the slightest. They didn't want me, Mother. They wanted the dowry. And when they realized Father's fortune isn't what it used to be, they moved on to girls with better prospects and fewer opinions." Her mother's face turned the color of overcooked beets. "Your opinions are precisely the problem. No man wants a wife who argues." "Then perhaps I'm not meant to be a wife." The slap didn't come, but the silence did, thick and suffocating. Rosalyn's younger sister, Louisa, kept her eyes on her plate. Their father had already left for his club, as he did every morning, avoiding the battlefield his home had become. "You will attend Lady Harrington's garden party this afternoon," her mother said, voice cold and final. "And you will smile. You will be pleasant. You will make yourself agreeable, or so help me, Rosalyn. I will accept Lord Pemberton's offer on your behalf." Rosalyn's fingers tightened around her napkin. "You wouldn't." Her mother's smile was thin and bitter. "Try me." Lady Harrington's garden party was the kind of event Rosalyn had learned to despise. Too many people pretending to enjoy themselves, too much gossip disguised as polite conversation, and too many mothers eyeing her like a horse that had failed to place at auction one too many times. She stood near the rose bushes, a glass of lemonade in her hand, trying to look engaged while Mrs. Pemberton, Lord Pemberton's sister, droned on about the medicinal properties of lavender. "Of course, my brother swears by it for his digestion. He takes it every evening before bed. Very regular, my brother, very disciplined." "How fortunate for him," Rosalyn said. "He's looking for a wife, you know, someone sensible, someone who understands the value of routine." Rosalyn forced a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "I'm sure he'll find someone perfectly suited. He's already expressed interest in you, dear." The lemonade suddenly tasted sour. "Has he?" "Oh, yes. He thinks you have good bones. Sturdy. That's what he said. Sturdy." Rosalyn nearly choked. "How romantic." Mrs. Pemberton leaned in, her breath smelling faintly of peppermint and something less pleasant. "Between you and me, dear, you're not getting any younger. A woman in your position can't afford to be picky." That was it. The final thread snapped. Rosalyn set her glass down on the nearest table with more force than necessary. "If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Pemberton, I suddenly feel the need for air that doesn't reek of desperation." She turned and walked away before the woman could respond, her heart hammering, her face flushed. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers starting to spread like wildfire. Rude, ungrateful. No wonder she's still unmarried. She didn't care. She was so tired of caring. She found herself near the back of the garden, where a small group of younger women had gathered beneath a willow tree. Lady Beatrice Carrington, Miss Annabel Foster, and a few others whose names Rosalyn could never quite remember. "Rosalyn," Beatrice waved her over. "We were just talking about the most absurd marriage proposals we've ever heard." Annabel giggled. Lord Finch proposed to me by comparing me to his favorite hunting dog. He said I had the same loyal eyes. The group erupted in laughter. Rosalyn felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "What about you, Rosalyn?" Beatrice asked. "Any horror stories?" Rosalyn sank onto the bench beside them. "My mother is trying to marry me off to Lord Pemberton." Gasps all around. "The one who's older than most of the furniture in Westminster?" "The very same." "That's criminal," Annabel said. "It's practical," Rosalyn replied bitterly. "I'm 24, unwed, and apparently made of sturdy bones. What more could a man want?" More laughter, but there was an edge to it now, a shared understanding of just how little control any of them really had. "You should just refuse," Beatrice said. "Tell your mother you'd rather die a spinster than marry someone you can't stand." "I've tried. She's threatened to accept on my behalf." "Can she even do that? Legally?" "Probably not. But she'll make my life so unbearable that I'll cave just to escape." Annabel sighed. "It's all so unfair, isn't it? Men get to choose, we just get to wait and hope we're chosen by someone who doesn't make us miserable." "I'd marry a tree if it meant I didn't have to deal with this anymore," Rosalyn muttered. Beatrice laughed. "A tree might be an improvement over Lord Pemberton. At least a tree wouldn't talk about its digestion." The laughter grew louder, more reckless. Someone refilled glasses from a bottle of wine that had been smuggled out from the main party. The afternoon sun was warm, the company was sympathetic, and for the first time in weeks, Rosalyn felt something close to relief. "You know what you should do?" Beatrice said, her eyes bright with mischief and wine. "You should make a vow, right here, right now." "A vow?" "Yes. Swear that you'll marry the very next man who walks through that gate." She pointed toward the iron gate at the far end of the garden, the one that led to the street. "Whoever he is. That way it's fate, not your mother's choice, not some arrangement, just pure chance." "That's absurd," Rosalyn said. "It's hilarious," Annabel countered. "It's dangerous," another girl added, grinning. Rosalyn looked at the gate. It was closed. No one had used it all afternoon. The chances of anyone walking through in the next few minutes were slim to none. And the idea of making her own reckless choice, even a joke of one, felt intoxicating. "Fine," she said, standing. She raised her glass. "I, Rosalyn Thornwell, swear that I will marry the very next man who walks through that gate." The girls erupted in cheers and laughter. "Binding vow," Beatrice declared. "Witnessed by all of us," Annabel added. Rosalyn grinned, feeling wild and free and utterly reckless. "Whoever he is, rich, poor, handsome, hideous, I'll marry him. Let fate decide for once instead of—" The gate groaned. The laughter stopped. The iron hinges creaked as the gate swung open, and a figure stepped through. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black, from his polished boots to his severe coat to the dark hair that fell just slightly too long over his forehead. His face was all sharp angles and cold lines, his eyes the color of a winter storm. Rosalyn's breath caught. She knew who he was. Everyone did. Duke Ashford Grimwood, the cold Duke, the man who'd been engaged twice and buried both fiancés before the weddings ever took place. The man who never smiled, never laughed, never showed even a flicker of warmth. The man who was said to have ice where his heart should be. He stopped just inside the gate, his gaze sweeping over the group of women frozen beneath the willow tree. Then his eyes locked on Rosalyn. "I was told Lady Harrington's party was in the main garden," he said, his voice low and even, with no trace of emotion. "But I seem to have wandered into the wrong section." No one spoke. Rosalyn's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. Beatrice, ever bold, found her voice first. "You're not in the wrong place, Your Grace. We were just—" "Making a vow," the Duke said. Rosalyn's stomach dropped. He'd heard. "It was a joke," she said quickly, her voice coming out sharper than she intended. "Just a silly game. Nothing serious." The Duke tilted his head slightly, studying her the way one might study a puzzle. "You swore you would marry the next man who walked through that gate." "I didn't mean—" "I walked through the gate." The world seemed to tilt. "Your Grace, she wasn't serious," Beatrice tried again. "It was just—" "A vow is a vow, Miss Carrington." He didn't look away from Rosalyn. "Isn't that correct, Miss Thornwell?" Rosalyn felt trapped. cornered. Every instinct screamed at her to laugh it off, to run, to do anything but stand there under the weight of that cold, unrelenting gaze. But something else stirred inside her, something reckless and furious and tired of being told what to do. Yes, she heard herself say. A vow is a vow. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or interest. Then we have an agreement, he said. Wait, what? Annabelle's voice was a strangled whisper. The Duke turned slightly, addressing the group as though this were a perfectly normal conversation. Miss Thornwell has made a binding declaration, witnessed by all of you. She swore to marry the next man who walked through that gate. I am that man. Therefore, we are engaged. That's not how engagements work, Beatrice said. Isn't it? He looked back at Rosalyn. Or would you prefer I inform your mother that you've refused a duke in favor of waiting for Lord Pemberton? Rosalyn's blood turned to ice. How do you— I make it my business to know things, Miss Thornwell. Your mother has been rather vocal about her intentions regarding your future. I imagine she'd be quite displeased if you turned down an offer from me. He was right. She knew he was right. Her mother would be furious. Worse, she'd be triumphant. A duke. A duke had proposed, even if the proposal was the strangest, coldest, most absurd thing Rosalyn had ever experienced. I don't understand, Rosalyn said slowly. Why would you want this? You don't even know me. I don't need to know you, he replied. I need a wife. You need an escape. It's a practical arrangement. Practical. Yes. You don't believe in love, then? I don't believe in illusions, Miss Thornwell. Love is one of many. Annabelle made a small, distressed sound. Beatrice looked like she was watching a carriage accident unfold in slow motion. Rosalyn felt something crack open inside her, something that had been locked away for years beneath layers of duty and expectation and fear. And if I refuse? She asked. Then you refuse. I'll leave. You'll return to your mother's plans. Lord Pemberton will likely propose within the month. You'll spend the rest of your life listening to discussions about digestion and regularity. His gaze didn't waver. Or you can accept, and I'll give you something far more valuable than affection. What's that? Freedom. The word hung in the air like a promise and a threat all at once. Rosalyn's hands were shaking. This was insane. This was reckless beyond measure. This was a choice. Her choice. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow evening, the Duke replied. After that, the offer expires. He inclined his head, a gesture that was somehow both polite and dismissive, and turned to leave. Wait, Rosalyn called out before she could stop herself. He paused, glancing back. Why me? She asked. If you just need a wife, there are dozens of women who would leap at the chance to marry a duke. Why choose someone who clearly doesn't want you? For the first time, something almost resembling emotion crossed his face. It might have been amusement, or maybe just cold calculation. Because, Miss Thornwell, he said quietly, I don't want someone who wants me. I want someone who wants her freedom badly enough to take it, even from a man like me. Then he walked away, leaving Rosalyn standing in the garden with her heart racing and her entire world cracked wide open. The carriage ride home was silent. Rosalyn sat across from her mother and Louisa, staring out the window without seeing anything. Her mother had found her shortly after the Duke left, her face alight with a mix of shock and savage satisfaction. A Duke, she'd whispered, gripping Rosalyn's arm hard enough to bruise. You've caught the attention of a Duke. Rosalyn hadn't corrected her, hadn't explained. What was there to say? I made a joke, and he took it seriously. Or maybe he didn't, and this is some kind of game I don't understand yet. Now, sitting in the dim interior of the carriage, she felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. I always knew you had it in you, her mother said suddenly, breaking the silence. All those years of sulking and defiance, and look, you've landed the most eligible man in England. He's not eligible, Rosalyn said quietly. He's feared. He's a duke. That's all that matters. Louisa, who had been silent the entire ride, finally spoke. Her voice was small, worried. Rosalyn, are you sure about this? Everyone says he's cold, that he doesn't feel anything. He doesn't, Rosalyn replied. He told me as much. Her mother waved a dismissive hand. Feelings are overrated. Security is what matters, stability, a title. Rosalyn closed her eyes. She could still see the Duke's face, sharp, unreadable, like a mask carved from ice. She could still hear his voice, low and certain. I'll give you something far more valuable than affection. Freedom. What did that even mean? When they arrived home, Rosalyn went straight to her room, ignoring her mother's attempts to discuss wedding plans, guest lists, the scandal and glory of it all. She locked the door, sank onto her bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow evening. That's how long she had. 24 hours to decide whether to marry a man who couldn't love her or stay and be forced into a life she couldn't survive. She didn't sleep. By morning, she'd paced her room so many times she'd worn a path in the rug. Her mind spun in circles, weighing options, imagining futures, spiraling into panic, and then back to something that almost felt like clarity. At breakfast, her mother was already planning. We'll need to commission a new wardrobe, of course. And the guest list, the guest list will be the talk of the season. A duke, my daughter, a duchess. Rosalyn pushed her eggs around her plate. Louisa reached under the table and squeezed her hand. After breakfast, Rosalyn escaped to the small library at the back of the house, the one room her mother never entered because she found reading frivolous. She pulled out a book at random and pretended to read, but the words blurred together. The door creaked open. Louisa slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. She sat down beside Rosalyn, tucking her feet under her skirts. Are you really going to marry him? She asked. Rosalyn set the book down. I don't know. Do you want to? I don't know that either. Louisa was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, what's he like? Rosalyn thought about it. Cold. Blunt. He doesn't pretend to be anything he's not. That sounds lonely. It does, doesn't it? But maybe... Louisa hesitated. Maybe that's better than pretending. Better than marrying someone who'll smile at you and lie. Rosalyn looked at her sister, sweet, hopeful Louisa, who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. Maybe, Rosalyn said quietly. The day passed in a haze. Rosalyn tried to distract herself with embroidery, with reading, with anything that would stop her mind from spinning. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the Duke's face, heard his voice. I don't believe in illusions, Miss Thornwell. As the sun began to set, a knock came at the front door. Rosalyn's heart lurched. She heard the butler's voice, low and formal. Then footsteps in the hallway. Her mother appeared in the doorway of the drawing room, her face flushed with excitement. He's here, she hissed. The Duke is here. He's asked to speak with you, alone. Rosalyn stood, smoothing her skirts with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Alone? I'll be just outside, her mother said, as though that were any comfort. Rosalyn walked to the parlor, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. The Duke stood by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn when she entered. Miss Thornwell, he said, your grace. Silence. Then he turned and those cold, storm-gray eyes met hers. Have you made your decision? Rosalyn's throat was dry. She forced herself to speak. I have questions first. He inclined his head. Ask. You said you'd give me freedom. What does that mean? It means you will have your own rooms, your own income, your own choices. You will not be required to perform the duties of a traditional wife beyond public appearances. You will have autonomy. And in exchange? Loyalty, discretion, honesty. He paused. I will not tolerate deception, Miss Thornwell. If you agree to this, you will tell me the truth, even when it's inconvenient. I will do the same. No love, she said quietly. No love, he agreed. No false promises, no illusions. Then what is this? A partnership, built on mutual benefit and respect. Respect. The word felt foreign coming from him, but his tone didn't waver. Rosalyn took a breath. And if I refuse? Then you refuse. I'll leave, and you'll never hear from me again. She believed him. There was no manipulation in his voice, no pressure, just cold, hard fact. She thought of Lord Pemberton, of her mother's suffocating control, of a future that felt like a slow death, and then she thought of the Duke's words. Freedom. I accept, she said. The Duke didn't smile, didn't react at all, really. He simply nodded. Then we're engaged. The word hung in the air between them like a contract signed in ice. Her mother burst through the door before Rosalyn could even exhale. Well, what did he say? What did you say? The Duke turned, his expression unchanged. Miss Thornwell has agreed to become my wife. The banns will be posted tomorrow. The ceremony will take place in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Rosalyn's mother let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a shriek of triumph. 3 weeks! Oh, that's hardly enough time to… We'll need to notify everyone, order the dress, arrange the flowers. There will be no flowers, the Duke said. Her mother blinked. I'm sorry? No flowers, no grand reception, no spectacle. His tone was flat, matter of fact. The ceremony will be private, immediate family only, a quiet affair. But, Your Grace, surely… Those are my terms, Mrs. Thornwell. If they're unacceptable, the engagement ends now. Rosalyn watched her mother's face cycle through shock, outrage, and finally calculation. A private wedding wasn't ideal, but a ducal wedding was still a ducal wedding. The title alone would be enough to elevate their family's standing for generations. Of course, her mother said, forcing a smile that looked painful. Whatever you think best, Your Grace. He nodded once, then turned back to Rosalyn. I'll call on you tomorrow to discuss the arrangements. 10 o'clock. I'll be here, Rosalyn said, surprised her voice came out steady. He left without another word, without even a goodbye. Just turned and walked out as if he'd concluded a business transaction, which she supposed he had. The moment the front door closed, her mother whirled on her. 3 weeks, Rosalyn, 3 weeks to prepare you to become a duchess. We have so much to… I'm tired, Rosalyn interrupted. I'm going to bed. But we need to… Tomorrow, Mother. We'll discuss it tomorrow. She walked upstairs before her mother could protest, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settling over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Inside her room, she locked the door and pressed her back against it, her heart hammering. She was engaged. To a duke. To a man who'd promised her freedom, but looked at her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. A soft knock made her jump. It's me! Louisa's voice came through the wood. Rosalyn opened the door. Her sister slipped inside, her eyes wide with concern. Are you all right? I don't know, Rosalyn admitted. Ask me in 3 weeks. Louisa sat on the bed, patting the space beside her. Rosalyn joined her, and for a long moment they just sat there in silence. He's very… Louisa trailed off. Cold? I was going to say intense. Rosalyn let out a short laugh that had no humor in it. That's one word for it. Do you think you can be happy with him? I don't think happiness is part of the arrangement. Then what is? Rosalyn thought about it. Survival, she said finally. On my own terms. Louisa took her hand. That's not nothing. No, Rosalyn agreed quietly. It's not. The next morning arrived too quickly. Rosalyn barely slept, her mind racing through everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. By the time 10 o'clock rolled around, she felt hollow and wired at the same time. The Duke arrived exactly on time. Of course he did. Her mother had laid out tea in the drawing room as if this were a normal social call. The Duke sat in the chair across from Rosalyn, ignoring the tea entirely. We need to establish expectations, he said without preamble. Rosalyn's mother started to speak, but the Duke held up a hand. Mrs. Thornwell, if you would give us a moment. It wasn't a request. Her mother's face flushed, but she stood. Of course, Your Grace. I'll be just outside if you need anything. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The Duke waited until her footsteps faded, then turned his full attention to Rosalyn. Your mother will attempt to control every aspect of this wedding. I need to know now. Do you want her involved, or shall I handle it? Rosalyn blinked. You're asking my opinion. I told you, honesty. That includes respecting your preferences where possible. He leaned back slightly. So, which is it? I don't want a spectacle, Rosalyn said. I don't want to be paraded around like a prize mare. If you can prevent that, then yes, handle it. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Done. The ceremony will be at Blackthorn Chapel on my estate. Your immediate family, my solicitor, and a witness. nothing more. My mother will hate that. Your mother's feelings are not my concern. Yours are, to the extent that they affect our arrangement. It should have sounded callous, but somehow it didn't. It sounded clear, honest, just like he'd promised. What about after? Rosalyn asked. After the wedding, what happens then? You'll live at Blackthorn Manor. You'll have the East Wing, your own rooms, your own space. I occupy the West Wing. We'll share common areas when necessary for appearances, but otherwise your time is your own. And at night? His expression didn't change. I will not require anything of you in that regard. Ever. The marriage will be legal, but unconsummated unless you decide otherwise. Heat crept up Rosalyn's neck, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. And if I never decide otherwise? Then you never do. I meant what I said, Miss Thornwell. I don't want a wife in the traditional sense. I want a partner who can navigate society beside me and then disappear into her own life when the performance is over. That's all this is to you? A performance? Isn't it? He tilted his head slightly. You'll play the role of Duchess. I'll play the role of husband. We'll both get what we need without the messiness of actual emotion. That sounds lonely. It sounds practical. Rosalyn studied him, trying to find any crack in that icy facade. Did someone hurt you? Is that why you're like this? For the first time, she saw something shift in his eyes. Not warmth, nothing so simple as warmth, but something darker. Something that looked like old pain wrapped in barbed wire. No one hurt me, he said quietly. I simply learned early that sentiment is a luxury I can't afford. My father was sentimental. It destroyed him and nearly destroyed our family's legacy. I won't make the same mistake. So you decided to feel nothing instead? I decided to be honest about what I can offer and what I cannot. He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Between now and then, I'll handle the arrangements. You focus on preparing yourself mentally for the change. If you have questions or concerns, send word. I'll answer them. Just like that? Just like that. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. There will be gossip, rumors. People will say terrible things about both of us. Can you handle that? Rosalyn thought about all the whispers she'd endured over the years. All the pitying looks, the snide comments, the casual cruelty of the tone. I've been handling it my whole life, she said. He nodded. Good. Then we'll survive this together. Then he was gone, leaving Rosalyn alone with the strange sensation that she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life, and she still had no idea which. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and panic. Her mother oscillated between ecstatic triumph and bitter frustration at being excluded from the planning. The Duke had meant what he said. He handled everything. Rosalyn received exactly 2 communications from him. The first was a brief note informing her that the ceremony would take place at 11 in the morning. The second was a package containing a wedding dress. Rosalyn opened it alone in her room, her hands shaking. The dress was beautiful, simple, elegant, with none of the excessive lace and frills her mother would have chosen. Ivory silk, clean lines, understated but striking. It fit her perfectly. She stared at it for a long time, wondering how he'd known her measurements, her preferences, her size. Then she remembered what he'd said. I make it my business to know things. It should have been unsettling. Instead, it felt oddly considerate, as if he'd paid attention to who she actually was, rather than who he wanted her to be. Louisa helped her pack her belongings the night before the wedding. Her mother had insisted on keeping most of Rosalyn's things. You'll have everything you need at Blackthorn Manor, and besides, Louisa might want some of these dresses, which was just another way of saying she'd already written Rosalyn out of their family home. Are you scared? Louisa asked, folding a nightgown into the small trunk. Terrified, Rosalyn admitted. Of him? Of everything. Of making the wrong choice. Of making the right choice, and it still not being enough. Louisa set down the nightgown and hugged her. You're the bravest person I know. I don't feel brave. Brave people never do. That night, Rosalyn lay awake for hours, watching the shadows move across her ceiling. Tomorrow she would become the Duchess of Grimwood. Tomorrow her entire life would change. She just hoped she'd survive it. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and cold. Fitting, Rosalyn thought as she dressed in the ivory silk gown. Her mother fussed over her hair, weaving it into an elaborate style that Rosalyn knew she'd hate within the hour. "You look beautiful," her mother said, but her eyes were distant, already calculating what this marriage would mean for Louisa's prospects, for the family's reputation. "Thank you," Rosalyn said, because what else was there to say? The carriage ride to Blackthorn Manor took 2 hours. Rosalyn watched the landscape change from the familiar streets of London to rolling countryside, then to something darker and more imposing. The trees grew thicker, the sky heavier. When Blackthorn Manor finally came into view, Rosalyn's breath caught. It was massive. Gray stone, sharp angles, towers that looked like they belonged in a Gothic novel. Beautiful in a severe, unforgiving way, like its owner. The chapel was a smaller building set behind the main house, half covered in ivy. Inside, it was dim and quiet, lit by candles that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. The Duke stood at the altar, dressed in black as always. His solicitor stood to one side, a witness Rosalyn didn't recognize on the other. Her family filed in, her mother, her father, Louisa, and took their seats. Rosalyn walked down the short aisle alone. No one gave her away. She was giving herself. The Duke watched her approach, his expression unreadable. When she reached him, he extended his hand. She took it. His fingers were warm, which surprised her for some reason. The ceremony was brief, perfunctory. The words felt heavy and binding, even though they were spoken in the same flat tone the officiant probably used for every wedding. "Do you, Ashford Grimwood, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Rosalyn Thornwell, take this man?" Rosalyn's voice came out steadier than she expected. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." No kiss. The Duke simply squeezed her hand once, a silent acknowledgement, and then released it. They signed the registry. Her mother cried. Her father looked relieved. Louisa tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. And just like that, Rosalyn was married. The Duke had arranged for a small meal to be served after the ceremony. Nothing elaborate, just enough to satisfy social convention. Rosalyn picked at her food, unable to eat, while her mother prattled on about how beautiful everything was, how fortunate Rosalyn was, how this was the beginning of such a wonderful new chapter. The Duke said nothing, just sat there, eating methodically, occasionally glancing at Rosalyn as if checking to make sure she hadn't bolted. Finally, mercifully, it was time for her family to leave. Her mother hugged her too tightly, whispering frantic last-minute advice about being a good wife. Her father shook the Duke's hand and said something about him being a fortunate man, which was absurd. Louisa hugged her last, holding on longer than necessary. "Write to me," she whispered. "I will," Rosalyn promised. Then they were gone, and Rosalyn was alone with her husband. The Duke gestured toward the house. "Come, I'll show you to your rooms." They walked in silence through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and windows that looked out onto grounds stretching into the distance. Everything was immaculate, cold, beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful. He stopped in front of a set of double doors. "The East Wing, your rooms." He opened the doors. The space beyond was larger than her entire bedroom at home had been. A sitting room with a fireplace, bookshelves lining the walls, windows overlooking the gardens. Through another doorway, she could see a bedroom with a four-poster bed, a writing desk, an armoire. "It's..." She couldn't find the words. "Yours," the Duke said. "Completely. I will not enter without your permission, ever." She turned to look at him. "And if I want to leave? Then you leave. The arrangement stands. You have freedom to move about the grounds, to travel to London if you wish, to do as you please. I ask only that you maintain appearances when necessary. Which means dinners when we have guests, social events where my presence is required and a wife's absence would be noted. Beyond that, you're free." It sounded too good to be true. There had to be a catch. "Why are you being so generous?" His jaw tightened. "This isn't generosity, miss." He stopped. "Rosalyn, this is the arrangement we agreed to. I honor my agreements." She wanted to ask more, to push until that icy facade cracked, but exhaustion was settling over her like a heavy blanket. "I should let you rest," the Duke said, as if reading her thoughts. Dinner is at 8 if you wish to join me. If not, I'll have a tray sent to your room. I'll join you, she heard herself say. He looked surprised. You don't have to. I know, but I should start learning how this works. How we work. Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite approval, but close. 8 o'clock then. The dining room is on the first floor, west side. A maid will show you if you get lost. He turned to leave, then paused. Rosalyn. It was the first time he'd used her given name without hesitation. Yes? You made a brave choice today. I hope you don't come to regret it. Before she could respond, he was gone. Rosalyn stood alone in her new rooms, in her new home, married to a man she barely knew, and wondered what the hell she'd just done. The hours until dinner passed strangely. Rosalyn explored her rooms, finding them stocked with everything she could possibly need. Clothes in her size hanging in the armoire, books on topics she actually cared about, writing supplies, even a small selection of sweets on the side table. He'd paid attention. Somehow, impossibly, the cold Duke had paid attention to who she was. A maid arrived at 7:45 to help her change for dinner. The girl was young, nervous, curtsying so low she nearly fell over. Your Grace, she squeaked. I'm Mary. I've been assigned to attend you. You don't need to curtsy every time you see me, Mary. Oh, but the Duke said... What did he say? Mary flushed. He said to treat you with the utmost respect and to follow your instructions exactly. He was very firm about it, Your Grace. Rosalyn felt something strange twist in her chest. I see. Well, help me with this dress, and then you can show me to the dining room. The dress was dark green silk, simple but elegant. Mary helped her with the buttons, chattering nervously about the house, the staff, the Duke's routines. He's very particular, Your Grace. Everything must be exact, but he's fair, never raises his voice, never cruel, just exacting. And before me? Rosalyn asked carefully. Were there other women here? Mary's hand stilled. You mean the others, Your Grace? The ones he was engaged to before? Yes. They never made it this far, Your Grace. Both died before the wedding. Terrible tragedies they were. One in a carriage accident, the other from a fever. People say he's cursed, but I don't believe that. Just unlucky. Or careful, Rosalyn thought, but she kept that to herself. The dining room was exactly as imposing as she'd expected. A long table that could easily seat 20, though only 2 places were set, one at the head, one to the right. The Duke was already there, standing by the window, a glass of wine in his hand. He turned when she entered. His eyes swept over her once, quickly, then returned to her face. You came. I said I would. People say many things. They rarely mean them. I mean what I say. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. I'm beginning to see that. He pulled out her chair. She sat, acutely aware of how close he was, how his hand briefly brushed her shoulder as he pushed the chair in. Dinner was served, courses that were beautifully prepared but felt heavy and rich. Rosalyn ate mechanically, hyper-aware of the silence stretching between them. You're allowed to speak, the Duke said finally. This isn't a funeral, isn't it? We just buried your bachelor life and my freedom. He actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like he'd surprised himself. I thought you said this arrangement gave you freedom. Freedom in a cage is still a cage. Then perhaps you should view it differently. He set down his fork. You're not caged, Rosalyn. You're protected. There's a difference. Protected from what? From men like Lord Pemberton, from a mother who sees you as a bargaining chip, from a society that would have crushed you eventually. His gaze was steady, unflinching. Here, you have power. Use it. Power, she repeated. I'm a wife. I have no power. You're a duchess. You have more power than you realize. The question is whether you're brave enough to claim it. The challenge in his voice sparked something in her chest. You think I'm not brave? I think you're still deciding whether you want to survive or actually live. There's a difference there, too. Before she could respond, he stood. I have business to attend to. Feel free to explore the library if you wish. It's on the 2nd floor, east corridor. You'll find it well stocked. He left without waiting for a response. Rosalyn sat alone at the massive table, her dinner half-eaten, her mind racing. She was married to a man who spoke in riddles and challenges, a man who'd given her freedom but made her wonder if she even knew what to do with it. And somehow, impossibly, she found herself wanting to prove him wrong. The library became her refuge over the next few days. It was exactly as he'd described, well-stocked, with floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with everything from philosophy to poetry to scientific treatises. She spent hours there, losing herself in books, trying not to think about the strange half-life she was living. The Duke kept his distance. She saw him at dinner each evening, where they maintained a careful, polite conversation that revealed nothing. He asked about her day. She answered vaguely. He shared nothing of his own activities. They were two strangers playing house in a mansion too big for either of them. On the fourth day, Rosalyn received a letter from Louisa. Dearest Rosalyn, Mother says you're settling in well, though I suspect she's only saying that because it makes her look good. How are you really? Is he kind to you? Do you have everything you need? London feels empty without you. I miss our conversations. Please write back when you can. Your loving sister, Louisa. Rosalyn read the letter 3 times, then sat down at her writing desk to respond. But the words wouldn't come. How could she explain this strange existence, this marriage that wasn't a marriage, this life that didn't feel quite real? A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. The Duke entered. He never came to her rooms. The shock of seeing him there made her stand abruptly, knocking over the inkwell. "Damn," she muttered, grabbing for a cloth. "Leave it," he said. "I need to speak with you." Something in his tone made her stomach clench. "What's wrong?" "We have visitors arriving tomorrow, Lord and Lady Ashby. They're old family friends, and their presence is unavoidable." "All right. They'll expect to see a happily married couple. Can you manage that?" The bluntness of the question stung. "I'm not sure. Can you?" His expression darkened. "This is important, Rosalyn. The Ashbys are influential. If they believe our marriage is a sham, the rumors will spread. It will make both our lives significantly more difficult. So we lie. We perform. There's a difference." "Is there?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Yes. A lie is born from deception. A performance is born from necessity. We both need this arrangement to appear legitimate. That means convincing people we're at least content, if not happy. And how do you propose we do that? By acting like a couple who chose each other, who respect each other, even if we don't love each other. That shouldn't be hard. We do respect each other, don't we?" He was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was searching for something. "I'm beginning to," he said finally. Then he turned and left, leaving Rosalyn standing in her sitting room with ink spreading across her desk and her heart doing something strange and uncomfortable in her chest. The Ashbys arrived the next afternoon in a flurry of trunks and servants and Lady Ashby's high-pitched laughter. Rosalyn dressed carefully in a pale blue gown, pinning her hair up the way the Duke seemed to prefer. Simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious. She met him in the entrance hall. He was waiting for her, and when he saw her, something shifted in his expression. "You look well," he said. "Thank you." He held out his arm. She took it, and together they walked out to greet their guests. Lord Ashby was portly and jovial, with a booming laugh and a handshake that nearly crushed Rosalyn's fingers. Lady Ashby was thin and sharp-eyed, her smile not quite reaching her gaze as she assessed Rosalyn from head to toe. "So this is the new Duchess," she said. "My dear, you're even lovelier than they said. Though I must admit we were all terribly surprised when we heard Ashford had finally married, and so quickly." "When you know, you know," the Duke said smoothly, his hand settling at the small of Rosalyn's back. The touch was possessive, performative, and it made Rosalyn's skin prickle with awareness. "Indeed," Lady Ashby said, still watching them both with those calculating eyes. "And how did you meet?" "At a garden party," Rosalyn said before the Duke could answer. "I made a reckless vow, and he held me to it." Lady Ashby's eyebrows shot up. "How romantic." "It was honest," the Duke said, "which is more than most marriages can claim." Dinner that night was an exercise in careful theater. The Duke played his role perfectly, attentive but not effusive, his hand occasionally brushing Rosalyn's, his attention turning to her at regular intervals. Rosalyn matched him, laughing at the right moments, asking polite questions, playing the part of a contented bride. But under the table, her hands were clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. "You seem very well suited," Lord Ashby said over dessert. "Different from Ashford's previous, well." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Previous engagements," the Duke finished. "Yes, Rosalyn is nothing like them." "Because I'm still alive?" Rosalyn said lightly. The table went silent. Then Lady Ashby laughed, a sharp, startled sound. "Oh, I like her. She has spirit." The Duke's hand found Rosalyn's under the table. He squeezed once, whether in warning or approval, she couldn't tell. Later, after the Ashbys had retired to their rooms, the Duke walked Rosalyn back to her wing. "You did well tonight," he said. "So did you." They stopped outside her doors. The hallway was dim, lit only by a few scattered candles. "Lady Ashby doesn't believe us," Rosalyn said quietly. "No, she doesn't." "Does it matter?" "Not yet, but it will if we don't convince her otherwise." He paused. "She'll be watching us tomorrow, looking for cracks." "Then we won't give her any." He studied her for a long moment. "You're stronger than I thought you'd be." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." "Then here's one for you. You're less cold than you pretend to be." Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or fear. "Don't mistake performance for reality, Rosalyn. I am exactly what I appear to be." "Are you?" "Because I'm starting to think you're just as trapped as I am. You've just been trapped longer, so you've forgotten what freedom looks like." His jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might actually respond, might let that icy mask slip. Instead, he stepped back. "Good night, Rosalyn." "Good night, Ashford." She used his given name deliberately, watching for a reaction. He gave her none, just turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. But she'd seen it, just for a second. A crack in the armor, a glimpse of something human beneath all that ice, and it terrified her how much she wanted to see it again. Rosalyn didn't sleep that night. She lay in the massive four-poster bed, staring at the canopy above her, replaying every moment of the evening. The performance had been flawless. Too flawless, maybe. Lady Ashby's sharp eyes had missed nothing, cataloging every gesture, every glance, every carefully constructed moment of marital harmony. But it was that crack she'd seen in the Duke's armor that kept her awake. That flash of something raw and human before he'd locked it away again. "You've just been trapped longer, so you've forgotten what freedom looks like." She'd meant it as a challenge, a way to get under his skin. But now, in the dark, she wondered if she'd accidentally stumbled onto the truth. Morning came too early. Mary arrived with breakfast and news that made Rosalyn's stomach turn. "Lady Ashby has requested you join her for a walk in the gardens, Your Grace. She said it would be lovely to get to know you better." Of course she did. Rosalyn dressed in a practical walking dress, trying to prepare herself for whatever interrogation was coming. Lady Ashby was waiting by the fountain when Rosalyn emerged, her parasol already open despite the overcast sky. "There you are, my dear. I do hope you slept well." "Well enough," Rosalyn lied. They began walking along the gravel path, Lady Ashby's parasol casting strange shadows across the ground. For a few minutes they exchanged pleasantries about the weather, the gardens, the beauty of Blackthorn Manor. Then Lady Ashby's tone shifted. "You know, I've known Ashford since he was a boy. Such a serious child, always watching, always calculating. His father's death changed him, of course. He was only 16 when it happened." Rosalyn kept her expression neutral. "I didn't know that." "Oh yes, terrible business. The old Duke was a romantic, you see. Believed in love, passion, all those beautiful lies we tell ourselves. He made poor investments based on sentiment rather than logic. Nearly bankrupted the estate. When he died, young Ashford was left to pick up the pieces." "That must have been difficult." "Difficult?" Lady Ashby laughed softly. "It was transformative, my dear. He went from a somewhat normal boy to, well, the man you married, cold, calculating, incapable of real feeling." The words stung even though Rosalyn had thought similar things herself. Hearing them spoken aloud by someone else felt like an attack. "I don't think he's incapable of feeling," Rosalyn said carefully. "I think he's learned to protect himself." Lady Ashby stopped walking, turning to face Rosalyn directly. "Has he told you about his previous engagements?" Only that they ended tragically. Conveniently, you mean? Rosalyn's blood went cold. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, dear. I'm merely observing that it's remarkably fortunate for Ashford that both young women died before the marriages could take place, before they could discover what kind of man he really is. You think he had something to do with their deaths? I think Ashford is very good at arranging circumstances to his advantage. I think he's incapable of real attachment, and when these poor girls realized that when they tried to back out, Lady Ashby shrugged delicately. Well, accidents happen. Rosalyn's hands clenched at her sides. That's a serious accusation, is it? Or is it just the truth that no one wants to speak aloud? Lady Ashby's eyes glittered. Tell me, my dear, does he come to your bed at night? Does he show you any warmth, any affection whatsoever? Or does he treat you like a piece of furniture he purchased for the estate? The question was too close to the truth. Rosalyn felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hated. My marriage is none of your concern. Perhaps not, but I'd hate to see another young woman meet an unfortunate end simply because she discovered the Duke of Grimwood has no heart at all. Lady Ashby turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Rosalyn standing alone in the garden, her mind racing. Was it true? Could the Duke have been involved in his previous fiancé's deaths? The man she'd married was cold, calculating, guarded, but murderous. She thought about his hands, which had never been anything but careful with her. His promises of freedom, which he'd kept without fail. The way he'd stocked her rooms with things she actually cared about, as if her preferences mattered. None of that fit the picture Lady Ashby had painted. But then again, how well did she really know him? Rosalyn found herself walking toward the West Wing without consciously deciding to do so. She'd never been to the Duke's rooms before. It was part of their agreement, that boundary they both maintained. But right now she needed answers. She found him in his study, sitting at a massive desk covered in ledgers and correspondence. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. Rosalyn, is something wrong? Did you kill them? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. The Duke went very still. Kill who? Your previous fiancés. Did you have anything to do with their deaths? He set down his pen with exaggerated care. Who told you that? It doesn't matter who told me. Answer the question. Lady Ashby. It wasn't a question. She's always had a gift for poisoning wells. Then deny it. Tell me she's lying. He stood, moving around the desk to face her. His expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. No. Rosalyn's heart stopped. No? No, I won't deny it just to make you feel better. If you're going to believe the worst of me based on the word of a woman who's known me for all of 5 minutes of actual conversation over the years, then believe it. I'm not going to beg for your trust. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. His voice was cold, flat. I gave you freedom, Rosalyn. That includes the freedom to think whatever you want about me. Draw your own conclusions. That's not fair. Fair? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want fair? Fine. Here's the truth. Charlotte died in a carriage accident on her way to visit her sister. The axle broke. It was an accident investigated thoroughly by the authorities, and I was in London at the time with 24 witnesses. Eleanor died of scarlet fever. I was with her when it happened, holding her hand while she burned up from the inside. I paid for the best doctors, the best care, and it didn't matter. She died anyway. His voice had gotten progressively rougher, the icy control cracking. Both times I was blamed. Both times people whispered that I'd somehow orchestrated it, because a man like me couldn't possibly grieve like a normal person. And they were right. I didn't grieve like a normal person. I didn't fall apart, didn't rage, didn't weep. I handled the arrangements, settled the estates, and moved on with my life, which apparently made me a monster. Rosalyn felt something shift in her chest. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, you should have. You should question everything about this arrangement. About me. I'd be worried if you didn't. He turned back to his desk. But understand this. I am many things, Rosalyn. I'm cold. I'm calculating. I'm emotionally unavailable. But I am not a murderer. If you can't believe that, then this marriage is already over. The words hung between them like a blade. I believe you, Rosalyn said quietly. He looked at her sharply. Why? Because you could have lied. It would have been easier. Instead, you told me the truth, even though it hurt you to say it. She took a step closer. And because I've seen the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching, you're not as heartless as you pretend to be. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Don't make the mistake of thinking you know me, Rosalyn. You've been here less than a week. Then help me know you. Stop hiding behind this mask and let me see who you actually are. You wouldn't like what you saw. Try me. For a moment, she thought he might actually do it, might let down the walls and show her something real. But then his expression shuddered, the ice sliding back into place like a door slamming shut. We have guests to attend to, he said. We should return to the performance. He walked past her, leaving Rosalyn standing in his study with the scent of old books and ink, feeling like she'd just lost something she'd barely begun to grasp. Dinner that night was tense. Lord Ashby dominated the conversation with hunting stories while Lady Ashby watched Rosalyn and the Duke like a cat watching mice. The Duke was his usual controlled self, answering questions with minimal words, his face a perfect mask of polite disinterest. But Rosalyn noticed the way his jaw tightened whenever Lady Ashby spoke, the way his fingers drummed against his wine glass, a tiny tell that suggested he wasn't nearly as calm as he appeared. You know, Lady Ashby said as dessert was served, I was just telling Rosalyn about your father this morning, Ashford. Such a romantic man. It's a shame you didn't inherit any of his warmth. The Duke's fingers stopped drumming. My father's warmth nearly destroyed this estate. I learned from his mistakes. Did you? Or did you simply decide that feeling anything at all was too dangerous? Caroline, Lord Ashby said uncomfortably, perhaps we should— I'm merely making conversation, dear. Lady Ashby's smile was sharp. Though I suppose some topics are too painful to discuss, like how difficult it must be to maintain the pretense of a real marriage when there's clearly no actual feeling between you. Rosalyn felt the Duke tense beside her. Before he could respond, she spoke. You're right, Lady Ashby. There's no pretense here. The table went silent. We don't pretend to have some grand romance, Rosalyn continued, her voice steady. We have something better, honesty. We know exactly what this is, what we are to each other. There are no illusions, no false promises, just two people who respect each other enough to tell the truth. Lady Ashby's eyebrows rose. How very practical. It is, and it's more than most marriages can claim. Rosalyn looked at the Duke, finding his eyes already on her. I'd rather have honesty than pretty lies any day. Something shifted in his expression, not quite warmth, but something close to it. Appreciation, maybe, or respect. Well said, Lord Ashby interjected, clearly eager to move past the tension. I think that's quite admirable, actually. Too many marriages are built on unrealistic expectations. The conversation moved on, but Rosalyn felt the Duke's hand find hers under the table. He squeezed once, a silent thank you that made her chest tighten. After dinner, the Ashbys retired early, claiming fatigue from their journey. The moment they were gone, the Duke turned to Rosalyn. Walk with me. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Rosalyn followed him through the house and out into the gardens. The night was cool, the sky clear and full of stars. They walked in silence until they reached a stone bench overlooking the hedge maze. You didn't have to defend me, the Duke said. I wasn't defending you. I was defending our arrangement. Were you? Rosalyn sat on the bench, looking up at him. She was trying to humiliate us both. I wasn't going to let her. He sat beside her close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You meant what you said, about preferring honesty. Of course I did. Even if the truth is ugly? Especially then. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the maze. Charlotte and Eleanor. They wanted me to be someone I wasn't. Someone warm, romantic, capable of the kind of love they'd read about in novels. I tried, for both of them. I tried to be what they needed, but I couldn't sustain it. Eventually, they saw through the act, and they were miserable. So you decided never to act again. I decided to find someone who didn't need the act. Someone who could accept what I actually am. And what are you? He finally looked at her, and in the moonlight, his eyes looked almost vulnerable. Broken, probably. Damaged by my father's mistakes and my own fear of repeating them. Incapable of the kind of grand passion people expect from marriage. But capable of honesty, of respect, of keeping your promises. Is that enough? The question was so raw, so unlike him, that it took Rosalyn's breath away. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm willing to find out. His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the bench between them. His fingers were warm, his touch gentle. I'm trying, he said quietly, to be better than I am, to give you more than just freedom. I just don't know how. Then we'll figure it out together. For the first time since she'd met him, the Duke smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. You're nothing like I expected, Rosalyn Thornwell. Rosalyn Grimwood, she corrected, and you're exactly what I expected, just more complicated. They sat together in the garden until the cold drove them inside. Neither of them speaking, but both of them feeling the shift happening between them. Something was changing, something neither of them had planned for or expected, something that felt dangerously close to real. The next morning, the Ashbys departed in a flurry of polite goodbyes and knowing looks from Lady Ashby that made Rosalyn's skin crawl. The Duke stood beside her, his hand at the small of her back, playing the role of attentive husband until their guest's carriage disappeared down the drive. The moment it was gone, he dropped his hand and stepped away. That's done then, he said. Yes. An awkward silence stretched between them. After last night's conversation in the garden, Rosalyn didn't know where they stood. Were they still just business partners? Or had something shifted? I have estate business to attend to, the Duke said. I'll be in my study if you need anything. Back to normal then. Back to the careful distance they maintained. Rosalyn spent the morning in the library, trying to lose herself in books, but finding her mind wandering to the Duke's words from the night before. I'm trying to be better than I am. It was the most vulnerable thing she'd ever heard him say. Around midday, Mary appeared in the doorway, looking worried. Your Grace, there's a visitor, a gentleman from London. He says it's urgent. Rosalyn's heart sank. Who is it? Lord Pemberton, Your Grace. Of course it was. She found Lord Pemberton in the drawing room looking even more uncomfortable than usual. He stood when she entered, his face flushed. Miss Thornwell, Your Grace, I apologize for the intrusion. What are you doing here, Lord Pemberton? He twisted his hat in his hands. I felt I had to come, to speak with you directly. You see, your mother and I had an understanding. An understanding about what? About a marriage arrangement between us. She assured me you would be amenable, and then suddenly I hear you've married the Duke of Grimwood. I must say it's all quite irregular. Rosalyn felt ice forming in her stomach. My mother had no right to make any promises on my behalf. But she did. We had an agreement, witnessed by her solicitor, a betrothal contract, signed and sealed. He pulled a document from his coat pocket. This is legally binding, Your Grace. Your marriage to the Duke may very well be invalid. The world tilted. Rosalyn reached for the document with shaking hands. It was real. Her mother's signature, Lord Pemberton's signature, a date from 2 weeks before her wedding to the Duke. A betrothal contract promising Rosalyn's hand in marriage to Lord Pemberton. This can't be legal, she said. I never agreed to this. Your mother had the authority as your guardian. I'm 24 years old. She's not my guardian. Legally, while unmarried and living under her roof, she retained certain rights regarding, Get out! The Duke's voice cut through the room like a blade. Rosalyn spun to find him standing in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Lord Pemberton paled. Your Grace, I assure you, I'm only here to clarify. You're here to invalidate my marriage based on a contract that was drawn up without my wife's knowledge or consent. That's fraud, Lord Pemberton. And if you don't leave my house in the next 30 seconds, I'll have you arrested for it. But the contract is worthless. Rosalyn was not a party to it, did not sign it, and was already engaged to me when it was supposedly executed. Any competent solicitor will tell you the same. The Duke moved into the room, placing himself between Rosalyn and Lord Pemberton. Now leave, and tell Mrs. Thornwell that if she attempts anything like this again, she'll find herself facing legal consequences. Lord Pemberton gathered what remained of his dignity and fled. The moment he was gone, Rosalyn sank into the nearest chair, the document still clutched in her hands. She was shaking. She tried to sell me, she whispered. Even after I was married, she still tried to sell me. The Duke knelt in front of her, his hands covering hers. Hey, look at me. She met his eyes. They were still cold, still controlled, but there was something fierce burning behind them. She can't hurt you anymore, he said. You're under my protection now. That contract is worthless, legally and morally. You're my wife, Rosalyn. No one can change that without our consent. What if she tries again? What if she finds some other way? Then I'll handle it. That's what this arrangement is for, remember? Protection, freedom. I meant what I said. His hands were warm around hers, steady and sure. Rosalyn focused on that, on the solid reality of him kneeling in front of her, his usual ice thawed just enough to let her see the steel underneath. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. This is what we agreed to. But it felt like more than that. It felt like something real. He stood, pulling her up with him. I'm going to send for my solicitor. We're going to make absolutely certain there are no legal loopholes your mother can exploit. And we're going to cut off all contact with her until we're sure she understands the consequences of what she tried to do. She's still my mother. She's a woman who tried to sell her daughter to the highest bidder without even telling her. That's not a mother. That's a merchant. The brutal honesty of it made Rosalyn laugh, a sharp, slightly hysterical sound. You really don't believe in sugarcoating things, do you? No. And neither should you. He was right. She'd spent her whole life trying to see the best in her mother, trying to believe the cruelty came from a place of concern. But this was unforgivable. I need air, Rosalyn said. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know, I want to. They walked through the gardens in silence, past the hedge maze, and into the wilder sections of the grounds where the landscaping gave way to natural woods. Rosalyn's mind was racing, processing everything that had just happened. Her mother had tried to trap her, even in marriage to a duke, maybe especially in marriage to a duke. Her mother had seen an opportunity for more profit, more advantage. She never loved me, Rosalyn said aloud. Not really. I was always just a tool to her, a way to elevate the family's position. The duke didn't try to contradict her. Some people aren't capable of love, they only understand transactions. Like you? He stopped walking, turning to face her. Is that what you think? I don't know what to think anymore. I told you I don't believe in love. That's different from being incapable of it. His jaw tightened. I don't believe in it because I watched it destroy my father. Watched him make terrible decisions based on sentiment instead of logic. Watched him trust the wrong people, invest in failing ventures, ruin everything our family had built, all because he believed love would somehow make it work. So you decided never to feel anything. I decided never to let feelings override reason. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've locked yourself away so thoroughly that you can't tell the difference between protecting yourself and punishing yourself. His eyes flashed. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? You're so afraid of ending up like your father that you've become the opposite extreme. You won't let anyone close, won't let yourself feel anything real, because you think that makes you strong. But it doesn't. It just makes you alone. I'm not alone. I have you. Do you, or do you just have an arrangement with someone who happens to live in your house? The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but she was tired of dancing around the truth. Tired of pretending this strange half-life they were living was enough. What do you want from me, Rosalyn? His voice was low, dangerous. What exactly are you asking for? I don't know. She broke off, frustrated. I want something real. Even if it's real anger or real frustration or real anything, I'm tired of this careful performance we do for each other. This is real. This conversation right now, this is as real as I get. Then why does it feel like you're still holding back? Because I am. The words exploded out of him. Because if I don't hold back, if I let myself actually feel everything I'm supposed to be feeling, I don't know what happens. I don't know if I can control it, and control is all I have. Rosalyn stared at him. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, and it was terrifying in its rawness. Maybe control isn't what you need, she said quietly. Maybe what you need is to trust that you won't fall apart if you let go. I can't. Can't or won't. Does it matter? Yes, it matters to me. They stood there in the woods, two people who'd entered into a marriage of convenience and somehow stumbled into something far more complicated. The tension between them was electric, charged with everything they weren't saying. I should go back, the Duke said finally. The solicitor will be arriving soon. Ashford, don't. He held up a hand. Just don't. Not right now. He walked away, leaving Rosalyn standing alone among the trees, her heart pounding and her mind reeling. She'd pushed too hard. She'd seen that crack in his armor and pried at it until something broke. And now she didn't know if she'd made things better or irreparably worse. The solicitor arrived that afternoon and spent hours closeted with the Duke in his study. Rosalyn tried to distract herself with reading, with walking, with anything that would stop her from replaying that conversation in the woods. This is as real as I get. But it wasn't enough. She was starting to realize that somewhere along the way, this arrangement had stopped being enough. She wanted more from him, more honesty, more vulnerability, more of whatever lay beneath that icy surface, which was terrifying because it meant she was starting to care, starting to want something from this marriage beyond just freedom and security. Around dinner time, Mary knocked on her door. "Your Grace, the Duke asks if you'll join him in his study." Rosalyn's stomach clenched. "Of course." She found him standing by the window, his back to her. The solicitor was gone, and the desk was covered with documents. "The contract is worthless," he said without turning around. "My solicitor confirmed it. Your mother had no legal authority to bind you to an engagement, especially not after our marriage. Lord Pemberton has been informed that any further attempts to pursue this matter will result in legal action." "That's good," Rosalyn said carefully. "I've also had a letter sent to your mother. She's no longer welcome on this estate. If she wishes to see you, it will be at your discretion and on your terms." "Ashford, it's done, Rosalyn. I won't have her threatening you, manipulating you, or treating you like property. You're my wife. That means you're under my protection, whether you want it or not." His voice was hard, final. But there was something underneath it, something that sounded almost like fear. "I'm sorry," Rosalyn said, "for what I said in the woods. I had no right to push you like that." He finally turned to face her. His expression was carefully blank, but his eyes gave him away. They were stormy, turbulent, full of things he couldn't or wouldn't say. "You had every right. This is supposed to be a partnership built on honesty. You were being honest. So were you." "Was I?" She crossed the room to him, closing the distance between them. "You said you don't know what happens if you let yourself feel everything, that you're afraid of losing control." "I shouldn't have said that." "Why not? It's the truth, isn't it?" His jaw clenched. "The truth isn't always helpful." "Maybe not, but it's necessary." They stood close enough now that she could see the rapid pulse at his throat, could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. He was holding himself so tightly she thought he might shatter. "What are you doing, Rosalyn?" His voice was rough. "I'm trying to understand you." "Why?" "Because you're my husband. Because this arrangement we have, it's not enough anymore. At least not for me." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop running from whatever this is between us. I want you to stop pretending you feel nothing when I can see that you do." "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me. Help me understand." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the ice had cracked wide open. What lay beneath was raw and terrifying and achingly human. "If I let myself feel," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "if I let myself want you the way I'm starting to want you, I don't know if I can keep the promises I made. About freedom, about distance, about this being just an arrangement. And I need to keep those promises, Rosalyn, because if I break them, if I become someone who takes more than he gives, I'm no better than the men you were running from." The confession hung between them, fragile and powerful. Rosalyn's heart was racing. "What if I released you from those promises?" "What? What if I said I wanted more, that I wanted this to be real?" His expression was pure agony. "You don't mean that." "How do you know what I mean?" "Because you're scared and vulnerable, and your mother just tried to sell you off like livestock. You're not thinking clearly." "Stop telling me what I'm thinking." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "Stop deciding for me what I want or don't want. That's exactly the kind of control I was trying to escape." He flinched as if she'd struck him. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what? From you or from myself?" "Both. Either. I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture making him look suddenly younger, more vulnerable. "I'm trying to do the right thing here, and you're making it impossible. Maybe the right thing isn't what you think it is." "Then what is it?" She stepped closer, until she was near enough to feel the heat of him, to see the conflict raging in his eyes. The right thing is to be honest, to stop hiding behind these walls you've built and actually let me in, to take a risk on something real, even if it terrifies you. And if it falls apart? If I ruin this the way my father ruined everything, then we deal with it, together, as partners. Isn't that what you said this was supposed to be? His hands came up to cup her face, the gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. His eyes searched hers, looking for something, doubt, maybe, or an escape route. He found neither. If I do this, he said, his voice rough and low, if I let myself want this, want you, there's no going back. I won't be able to pretend anymore. Then don't pretend. The kiss was nothing like she'd expected. Not gentle, not tentative, but fierce and desperate, and full of everything he'd been holding back. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she responded in kind, her fingers gripping the lapels of his coat. It was a surrender and a claiming all at once, a breaking point that neither of them could walk back from. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be what you need. Then we'll figure it out, together. A knock at the door shattered the moment. They stepped apart quickly, both trying to compose themselves. Your Grace? Mary's voice came through the wood. I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's an urgent message from London. The Duke's expression hardened back into its usual mask, but Rosalyn could still see the cracks, could still see the man beneath the ice. Come in, he called. Mary entered holding a sealed letter. Her face was pale. It's from your mother's physician, Your Grace, she said, handing the letter to Rosalyn. He says it's urgent. Rosalyn's hands shook as she broke the seal and read the message. The words blurred together, her mind refusing to process them. What is it? The Duke asked. She looked up at him, her face numb with shock. My mother's had a stroke. She's asking for me. The physician says... Her voice broke. He says I should come quickly if I want to see her alive. The carriage ride to London felt endless. Rosalyn sat rigid in her seat, the physician's letter crumpled in her fist, while the Duke sat across from her in silence. He'd insisted on coming, had ordered the carriage prepared within the hour, and now watched her with those storm-gray eyes that saw too much. You don't have to see her, he said finally. Not if you don't want to. Rosalyn looked out the window at the darkening countryside rushing past. She's my mother. She tried to sell you to Lord Pemberton 2 days ago. I know what she did. Then why are we racing to her bedside like she deserves your forgiveness? The question cut straight to the bone. Rosalyn turned to face him, her throat tight. Because if I don't go, if she dies and I wasn't there, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I should have been. And I'm tired of wondering, Ashford. I'm tired of carrying around all these questions about whether she ever loved me, whether I was ever more to her than just a bargaining chip. Maybe if I see her now, maybe if she's actually dying, she'll finally tell me the truth. His expression softened, just barely, but enough that she could see it. And if the truth is worse than what you already know, then at least I'll know for certain. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. The gesture was simple, uncomplicated, and it steadied something inside her that had been threatening to break. I'll be there, he said. The whole time. If you need to leave, if it becomes too much, just say the word and we're gone. You don't have to... Stop. His grip tightened slightly. Stop telling me what I don't have to do. I'm your husband. Where you go, I go. That's how this works now. The words should have felt suffocating. Instead, they felt like an anchor. They arrived at the Thornwell house just after midnight. The windows were dark, except for a single lamp burning in her mother's room on the second floor. Louisa met them at the door, her face blotchy from crying. She's been asking for you, Louisa said, throwing her arms around Rosalyn. The physician says it's bad. She can't move her left side, and her speech is... It's difficult to understand her. Where's Father? Louisa's expression hardened. At his club. He said there was nothing he could do here, so he might as well be comfortable. Of course he did. Their father had perfected the art of abandoning difficult situations years ago. The Duke's hand settled at the small of Rosalyn's back. Do you want me to come up with you? Rosalyn hesitated. Part of her wanted him there, wanted his solid presence to lean on, but part of her needed to face this alone. Wait here, she said. I'll call if I need you. She climbed the stairs with Louisa, each step feeling heavier than the last. Outside her mother's door, she paused, trying to steady her breathing. "She's been saying strange things," Louisa whispered. "About regrets, about mistakes. I don't know if it's the stroke or if she actually means it." Rosalyn pushed open the door. The room smelled of medicine and something sour. Sickness, fear, mortality. Her mother lay in bed, propped up on pillows, the left side of her face drooping unnaturally. When she saw Rosalyn, her right eye widened and her mouth worked, trying to form words. "Rosalyn?" The voice was slurred, barely recognizable. Rosalyn moved to the bedside, pulling up a chair. Up close, her mother looked smaller somehow, diminished by illness in a way that was almost shocking. "I'm here, Mother." Her mother's good hand reached out, grasping at Rosalyn's sleeve. "Sorry, so sorry." The words hit like a physical blow. In 24 years, Rosalyn had never once heard her mother apologize for anything. "Sorry for what?" Rosalyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother's face contorted with effort. "All of it, Pemberton, the contract. I thought—" She struggled for breath. "Thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me? You tried to sell me to a man old enough to be my grandfather." "Security." The word came out mangled. "Wanted you. Safe. Provided for." "You wanted me controlled," Rosalyn said, years of bitterness rising in her throat. "You wanted me to be grateful and obedient and exactly what you needed me to be. You never cared what I wanted." Her mother's eye filled with tears, the right one, the one that still worked. "Wrong. I cared. Just didn't know how to show it." "So you showed it by trying to trap me in a marriage I didn't want? By making deals behind my back? By treating me like property instead of your daughter?" Scared, her mother's breathing was labored now. "Your father, useless, money running out. You were smart, beautiful. My best chance to save us all." And there it was. The ugly truth Rosalyn had always suspected but never wanted to confirm. She hadn't been a daughter. She'd been an investment. "I'm married to a duke now," Rosalyn said flatly. "Isn't that what you wanted? The family elevated, our position secured?" Her mother's face twisted, pain or regret or both. "Duke is cold, like ice. I wanted better for you." The hypocrisy of it almost made Rosalyn laugh. "You wanted better? You were going to force me to marry Lord Pemberton. At least he would have needed you. Duke doesn't need anyone." Something about those words made Rosalyn's chest tighten. Not because they were cruel, but because they were partially true. The Duke didn't need her, not in the traditional sense, but maybe that was exactly why their arrangement worked. "You're wrong about him," Rosalyn said quietly. "He's given me more freedom, more respect, more honesty in 3 weeks than you gave me in 24 years. He sees me as a person, not a tool. That's more than you ever did." Her mother made a sound that might have been a sob. "Tried my best." "Your best was terrible." The bluntness of it hung in the air. Her mother's good hand clutched the blanket, her breathing ragged. "Do you forgive me?" The question was plaintive, desperate. The question of a dying woman who'd suddenly realized the weight of her mistakes. Rosalyn sat with it, feeling the enormity of what her mother was asking. Forgiveness. Absolution. Permission to die without guilt. "No," Rosalyn said finally. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was cruel and selfish, and it hurt me in ways you'll never understand. But I'm here. I came when you called, even though part of me wanted to let you die alone. That's going to have to be enough." Her mother's face crumpled, fresh tears sliding down the right side of her face. "Not enough. Need you to understand. I loved you. Badly, wrong. But I loved you." The words should have meant something, should have healed some old wound. Instead, they just felt sad and insufficient. "If that's love," Rosalyn said, "then I'm glad I married someone who doesn't believe in it." She stood, but her mother's good hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Duke, he loves you. Can see it. Way he looks at you. Rosalyn pulled her hand free. You don't know what you're talking about. The stroke has confused you. Not confused, dying. Can see things clearly. He looks at you like you're precious, like you matter. The physician appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Your Grace, she needs to rest. The excitement isn't good for her. Rosalyn nodded, moving toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. Her mother had closed her eyes, her breathing shallow and uneven. She looked old, fragile, human in a way Rosalyn had never seen her before. I hope you get better, Rosalyn said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Not because I forgive you, but because you deserve the chance to live with what you've done. She left before her mother could respond. Louisa was waiting in the hallway, her face anxious. Is she? She's alive. For now. Rosalyn felt hollowed out, emptied of everything except exhaustion. The physician should stay with her tonight. I'll pay for whatever care she needs, but I can't be here, Louisa. I can't watch her die and pretend to grieve. I understand. Louisa hugged her tight. I'm glad you came, though. Even if it was awful, at least you know now. Know what? That she's human. That she made terrible choices but convinced herself they were right. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it makes her less of a monster and more of a broken person. Rosalyn pulled back, studying her sister's face. When did you get so wise? When you left and I had to deal with her alone. Louisa managed a weak smile. Go home to your Duke, Roz. He's been pacing in the drawing room like a caged animal ever since you went upstairs. The image made something warm bloom in Rosalyn's chest despite everything. She found the Duke exactly as Louisa had described, pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, his coat discarded, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He spun when she entered. How bad was it? Worse than I expected. Better than I feared. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. Are you all right? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. He pulled her into an embrace, unexpected, fierce, completely unlike him. Rosalyn let herself collapse into it, her face pressed against his chest, breathing in the scent of him. I want to go home, she whispered. Then we go home. The journey back to Blackthorn Manor passed in a blur. Rosalyn dozed fitfully against the Duke's shoulder while he stayed rigid and wakeful, one arm around her, protective even in sleep. Dawn was breaking when they finally arrived. The Duke helped her down from the carriage, his hand steady on her elbow. You should rest, he said. I don't want to rest. I want to feel normal again. Then what do you want? She looked up at him, this man who'd promised her freedom and given her so much more. I want you to stop calling me by my title when we're alone. I want you to stop holding yourself back like you're afraid you'll break me. I want you to show me what happens when you actually let yourself feel something. His jaw tightened. Rosalyn, you kissed me yesterday. Before the letter came. Don't tell me that didn't mean anything. It meant everything. That's the problem. Why is that a problem? Because I don't know how to do this. The words burst out of him, raw and frustrated. I don't know how to be what you need without losing myself completely. I don't know how to care about someone without it destroying me the way it destroyed my father. Then stop trying to know. Just feel it and deal with the consequences later. That's reckless. Good. I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of living in this half-existence where we're married but not really, partners but not really, something more than strangers but less than whatever we could be. He stared at her, his expression caught between terror and longing. If I do this, if I let myself want you completely, I need you to understand that I won't be able to go back to the way things were. I won't be able to pretend I don't care. I don't want you to go back. I want you to move forward with me. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, he took her hand and led her inside. They didn't speak as they climbed the stairs. Didn't speak as he led her not to her rooms but to his. Didn't speak as he closed the door behind them and turned to face her in the gray morning light. Last chance, he said, his voice rough. If you're going to change your mind, do it now. I'm not changing my mind. Something in him broke, or maybe finally healed. He crossed to her and kissed her with all the pent-up feeling he'd been holding back, and she responded in kind, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. This wasn't the desperate kiss from his study. This was something deeper, more certain. A choice they were both making with open eyes. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, both of them breathing hard. "I don't know how to be gentle," he admitted. "I don't know how to be romantic or say pretty things. I don't want gentle. I want real. Give me real, Ashford. Then you'll have it. All of it. Even the ugly parts. Especially the ugly parts." They stayed like that for a while, just holding each other as the sun rose over Blackthorn Manor. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Rosalyn felt like she was actually home. The next few days settled into a new rhythm. The Duke no longer retreated to his wing after dinner. Rosalyn no longer pretended she didn't wait for his knock on her door. They ate breakfast together, rode through the grounds together, spent evenings in the library arguing about philosophy and politics and everything in between. It wasn't smooth. There were moments when he still withdrew, when the old walls came up and she had to decide whether to push or give him space. There were moments when she still doubted whether this strange marriage could ever be something real and lasting. But there were also moments of startling intimacy, like when he absently played with her fingers while reading, or when she caught him watching her with an expression that looked almost like tenderness, or when they argued so fiercely about some trivial matter that it ended in laughter instead of anger. A week after the visit to her mother, a letter arrived from Louisa. "Dearest Rose, Mother is recovering, though slowly. The physician says she may regain some use of her left side with time and therapy. More importantly, she's been asking Father to revoke the betrothal contract with Lord Pemberton. She says she made a terrible mistake and wants to make it right. I don't know if this changes anything for you, but I thought you should know. She's trying, in her way, to fix what she broke. London is full of gossip about you and the Duke. Lady Ashby has been spreading rumors that your marriage is a sham, but no one seems to believe her. Apparently you two were quite convincing during her visit. Write when you can. I miss you terribly." Your loving sister Louisa Rosalyn read the letter twice, then handed it to the Duke. They were in his study. Their study, really, since she'd taken to working at the desk beside his in the afternoons. He scanned the contents, his expression unreadable. "Your mother is revoking the contract." "Seems like it. How do you feel about that?" Rosalyn considered it. "I feel like it's too little, too late, but also like maybe people can change even when you think they're incapable of it." He set the letter down, his eyes finding hers. "Are you talking about your mother or about me?" "Maybe both." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I'm not sure I've changed. I think you've just made it impossible for me to keep pretending I'm as cold as I want everyone to believe. Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. I'll hold you to that." He stood, moving around the desk to where she sat. His hand came up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so casual, so domestic, that it made her chest ache. "Lady Ashby's rumors," he said. "Does it bother you that people are talking?" "People are always talking. Let them. They'll say we married for convenience, that there's no real feeling between us. And what would you tell them if they asked?" He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I'd tell them that I married you because you were the only person who didn't want me to be something I'm not, and that somewhere along the way, that stopped being enough reason. Now I want you to want me, not because I'm a duke or because I can give you freedom, but because of who I actually am." The confession was so raw, so unlike him, that it stole her breath. "I do want you," she said softly. "Not despite who you are, but because of it. You're honest when everyone else lies. You're direct when everyone else plays games. You gave me freedom when everyone else wanted to trap me. How could I not want that? Want you?" Something shifted in his expression, the last wall finally crumbling. He leaned down and kissed her, soft and slow, and full of unspoken promises. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. "I'm going to be terrible at this, at being what you need. Then it's a good thing I didn't marry you to be perfect. I married you to be real. You're going to regret that when I inevitably mess this up. Probably, but I'll regret it together with you, and that's better than regretting it alone." He laughed, actually laughed, a real sound of genuine amusement. "When did you become such an optimist?" "When I married a pessimist and realized I needed to balance him out." They worked side by side for the rest of the afternoon, occasionally trading observations or asking questions, settling into the comfortable silence of two people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words. That evening, over dinner, the Duke made an announcement. "We're hosting a gathering in 2 weeks. Everyone who matters in society will be invited." Rosalyn set down her fork. "Why?" "Because Lady Ashby's rumors need to be addressed directly. Because people need to see that this marriage is real and legitimate. Because I'm tired of hiding what we are from the world." "And what are we?" He met her eyes across the table. "We're a married couple who chose each other. Not perfectly, not romantically, but honestly. And that's more than most of them can claim. That's going to require a performance." "No." He shook his head. "No more performances. We just show them the truth. Let them make of it what they will." The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. No pretense, no careful choreography, just them, as they actually were, in front of everyone who'd whispered and speculated and judged. "What if they don't believe us?" Rosalyn asked. "Then they don't. But at least we'll know we were honest." 2 weeks later, Blackthorn Manor was transformed. Servants scrubbed and polished every surface until the whole place gleamed. The ballroom, which Rosalyn hadn't even known existed, was opened and aired out, chandeliers lit for the first time in years. The kitchens worked around the clock, preparing food for what was shaping up to be the event of the season. Everyone who was anyone had accepted the invitation, including Lady Ashby. "Are you nervous?" Louisa asked, helping Rosalyn dress for the evening. She'd arrived that morning, bubbling with excitement about seeing Blackthorn Manor and meeting all the important guests. "Terrified," Rosalyn admitted. "Don't be. You look beautiful, and the Duke looks at you like you hung the stars." "He does not." "He absolutely does. I saw it at your wedding, and I see it even more now. Whatever's happening between you two, it's real." Rosalyn studied herself in the mirror. The dress was deep burgundy silk, elegant without being ostentatious. Her hair was pinned up loosely, a few curls framing her face. She looked like a duchess. She felt like an imposter. The Duke was waiting for her at the top of the grand staircase. He wore formal black, his hair perfectly styled, his expression its usual careful blankness. But when he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Heat and appreciation and something softer. "You look stunning," he said. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad." "Close enough." He offered his arm. "Ready to make the performance of our lives by not performing at all?" "That might be the most confusing thing you've ever said." "Get used to it. I'm full of contradictions." They descended the stairs together as the first guests began arriving. Lord and Lady Ashby were among the first, Lady Ashby's sharp eyes already cataloging every detail. "Your Grace, how lovely to see you again," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And what a magnificent gathering. I'm surprised you went to all this trouble." "My wife wanted to celebrate," the Duke said smoothly. "I wanted to give her what she wanted." It was a simple statement, but the way he said it, with quiet certainty and his hand warm on Rosalyn's back, made it clear he meant more than just the party. Lady Ashby's eyes narrowed. "How devoted." "How fortunate," Rosalyn corrected, looking up at the Duke, "to have married someone who actually listens." More guests arrived. A flood of nobility and wealth and social climbers, all eager to see the mysterious Duke and his unexpected bride. The Duke handled them with his usual cool efficiency, but Rosalyn noticed the small changes. The way he kept her close without making it look possessive. The way he deferred to her opinions when asked about household matters. The way his hand found the small of her back whenever they were separated by the crowd, as if anchoring himself to her. During dinner, Lord Ashby made a toast. "To the Duke and Duchess of Grimwood, may your marriage be long and prosperous." "Here, here!" The guests raised their glasses. Lady Ashby's voice cut through the murmur. "And may it be as genuine as it appears." The room went silent. It was a direct challenge, barely disguised as well-wishing. The Duke stood, his expression unreadable. "My wife and I appreciate your concern, Lady Ashby, but I assure you our marriage is exactly what it appears to be, a partnership built on honesty, respect, and mutual understanding, which is more than I can say for most marriages in this room." A collective gasp. The Duke had just insulted half the aristocracy. "We didn't marry for love," he continued, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "We married for practical reasons. But somewhere along the way, practicality became something more. Respect became trust. Trust became something neither of us expected or planned for. So yes, our marriage may be unconventional, but it's real. And it's ours. And frankly, that's all that matters. He sat down, his hand finding Rosalyn's under the table and squeezing once. The silence stretched for another beat. Then Lord Ashby started clapping. Slowly, others joined in until the whole room was applauding. Lady Ashby's face had gone pale. After dinner, during the dancing, the Duke pulled Rosalyn onto the floor. He wasn't a graceful dancer, too stiff, too controlled, but he held her like she mattered. "That was quite a speech," she said. "Too much?" "Perfect, actually, though you might have just made enemies of half the ton." "They were never really friends anyway," he spun her carefully. "Did you mean what you said earlier about being fortunate?" "Every word." "Did you mean what you said? About our marriage becoming something more?" He pulled her closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. "I've never meant anything more in my life." The music swelled around them, and Rosalyn realized that at some point during this strange, unconventional journey, she'd stopped trying to figure out what they were to each other. They were simply them, imperfect, complicated, real. Later, after the guests had gone and the manor was quiet again, they stood on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "Your mother was right about one thing," Rosalyn said. "What's that?" "You do look at me like I matter." He turned to face her fully, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You do matter, more than I ever thought anyone could. That terrifies you." "Less than it used to." She leaned into his touch. "We're going to be terrible at this sometimes. We're going to fight and hurt each other and make mistakes. I know. But we're going to do it together, as partners, as equals. As something more than either of us planned for," he added. She looked up at him, this man who'd promised her freedom and given her so much more. "I love you, Ashford Grimwood. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to. But I do." For a moment, he didn't respond. Then his arms came around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I love you too," he said against her hair. "I'm still not sure I know what that means or how to do it properly, but I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that." "You already are." He kissed her then, under the stars, with no audience and no performance. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and decided to make it real. When they finally pulled apart, Rosalyn was smiling. "So, what now? Now we live, honestly, imperfectly, together." "That sounds perfect." "It sounds terrifying." "Same thing." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and led her back inside to the home they'd built together. Not through grand gestures or romantic declarations, but through honesty, respect, and the courage to be exactly who they were. The morning after this gathering, Rosalyn woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. It took her a moment to remember where she was, not in her rooms in the East Wing, but in the Duke's bed, in his arms, where she'd fallen asleep after hours of talking and touching, and finally being honest about what they'd become to each other. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. "I'm trying to figure out if last night actually happened or if I imagined it." "Which part? The party where you essentially told the entire aristocracy that most of them are liars? Or the part where we both admitted we'd fallen in love despite our best efforts not to?" "Both. Either. All of it." His hand traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was just another performance. That you'll realize what a terrible mistake you've made. Stop that." "Stop what?" "Stop waiting for me to leave. Stop expecting this to fall apart. We're past that now." He was quiet for a moment. "Are we?" "Because I still don't know how to do this, Rosalyn. Last night I stood in front of everyone and declared feelings I barely understand. Today I'm supposed to just... what? Be a husband? Be in love? I don't have a map for this." She rolled over to face him fully. "Neither do I. But that's the point, isn't it? We figure it out together. We make mistakes and fix them and keep going. And when I inevitably mess this up, when my father's ghost catches up with me and I become exactly what I've been trying not to be, then I'll be there to remind you that you're not your father, that you're choosing differently, that you're already choosing differently just by being afraid of making his mistakes. He pulled her closer, his face buried in her hair. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. A knock at the door interrupted them. The Duke's expression immediately shuddered back into something more controlled. Your Grace? Mary's voice came through the wood, sounding nervous. I'm terribly sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation. Lord Pemberton is here. Again. And he's brought his solicitor. And the magistrate. Rosalyn felt ice form in her stomach. What? The Duke was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with sharp, angry movements. That bastard! I thought we'd settled this. Apparently not. They dressed quickly, Rosalyn fumbling with buttons while trying to tamp down the rising panic. Lord Pemberton was back. With legal authority this time. What if the betrothal contract actually held weight? What if her marriage to the Duke was somehow invalid? The Duke caught her hands, stilling their shaking. Whatever this is, we handle it together. Remember what I said. You're under my protection. I won't let him take you. You can't promise that if the law is on his side. Watch me. They found Lord Pemberton in the drawing room, looking even more uncomfortable than usual. With him was a pinch-faced solicitor and a magistrate who seemed deeply unhappy to be there. Your Grace, Lord Pemberton said, standing. Forgive the intrusion, but this matter requires immediate attention. The only matter requiring attention is your continued harassment of my wife, the Duke said coldly. I thought my last message was clear. It was. However, new evidence has come to light. The solicitor stepped forward, holding a document. A second betrothal contract signed by Miss Thornwell herself, predating her marriage to your Grace by 3 days. Rosalyn's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I never signed anything. Perhaps you don't remember. It was at Lady Harrington's garden party. You were with a group of young women, drinking wine. The vow, Rosalyn breathed. The stupid vow about marrying whoever walked through the gate. Exactly. Which, according to several witnesses, constitutes a verbal contract of marriage. Combined with this document, he held up the paper, which bears your signature, witnessed by Lady Beatrice Carrington and Miss Annabel Foster, we have grounds to challenge the validity of your current marriage. The Duke moved to take the document, his face a mask of cold fury. Rosalyn watched him scan the contents, saw his jaw tighten. This is a fraud, he said flatly. The signature is forged. Lady Carrington swears it's authentic. She says Miss Thornwell signed it as a joke, never thinking it would be legally binding. Rosalyn's mind was racing. She remembered the afternoon at the garden party, the wine, the reckless vow, but she didn't remember signing anything. Unless, Beatrice asked me to sign her diary, she said slowly. All of us did. She said she wanted to remember the afternoon. Is that what you're using? The solicitor's expression flickered. A signature is a signature, Your Grace. A signature in someone's personal diary is not a legal document, you idiot, the Duke snapped. This is the flimsiest excuse for a contract I've ever seen. Magistrate, surely you can see this is a waste of everyone's time. The magistrate looked distinctly uncomfortable. Your Grace, I'm inclined to agree, but Lord Pemberton has influential friends who've insisted this matter be investigated thoroughly. I have to at least examine the evidence. Then examine it. You'll find it's complete nonsense constructed by a desperate man and an opportunistic solicitor. Your Grace, I must protest, the solicitor began. Protest all you want. My wife never entered into any contract with Lord Pemberton. The betrothal agreement her mother signed was fraudulent, as my own solicitor has already proven. This diary signature is even more absurd. And if you persist with this harassment, I will have both of you arrested for attempted extortion. Extortion? Lord Pemberton sputtered. I'm merely trying to claim what was promised to me. Nothing was promised to you. You were told a lie by a woman who had no authority to make promises on her daughter's behalf. The fact that you've now manufactured additional false evidence only proves how desperate you are. The signature is real, the solicitor insisted. The signature may be real, but the document it's on is not a betrothal contract. It's a page from a diary. The Duke turned to Rosalyn. Do you have any recollection of signing a legal document agreeing to marry Lord Pemberton? None whatsoever. I signed Beatrice's diary because she asked me to. I had no idea she was planning to use it this way. Lady Carrington claims you knew exactly what you were signing, the solicitor said. Then Lady Carrington is lying, and I want to know why. The door opened and Louisa rushed in, her face flushed. I'm sorry, I tried to stop her, but she insisted. Lady Beatrice Carrington swept into the room behind her, looking furious. I heard my name mentioned. What exactly am I being accused of? Lord Pemberton's solicitor stepped forward. Lady Carrington, thank you for coming. Can you confirm that Miss Thornwell, the current Duchess, signed a betrothal agreement at Lady Harrington's garden party? Beatrice's eyes went wide. What? No, I never said any such thing. But the affidavit? What affidavit? I never signed anything. She whirled on the solicitor. Did you forge my name? The solicitor's face went pale. I was given to understand that you'd provided a sworn statement. By whom? A heavy silence fell. The magistrate cleared his throat. This is becoming quite irregular. Lord Pemberton, who exactly provided you with this supposed affidavit from Lady Carrington? Lord Pemberton looked at his solicitor, who looked at his papers, who looked anywhere but at the people in the room. My sister, Lord Pemberton said finally. Mrs. Pemberton said she'd secured Lady Carrington's testimony. Mrs. Pemberton lied to you, Beatrice said flatly. I never spoke to her about any of this, and I certainly never witnessed Rosalyn signing a betrothal contract. We were drunk and making jokes. That's all it was. The magistrate's expression had gone from uncomfortable to angry. Lord Pemberton, it appears you've brought me here under false pretenses. This entire case is built on fabricated evidence and forged documents. I strongly suggest you withdraw your claim before I'm forced to pursue charges against you and your solicitor for fraud. But I was told, what you were told and what is actually true appear to be two very different things. The magistrate gathered his papers. Your Grace, Duchess, I apologize for this intrusion. Lord Pemberton, you're fortunate I'm not arresting you right now. Consider this a warning. If you pursue this matter any further, you will face legal consequences. The solicitor was already backing toward the door. Lord Pemberton stood frozen, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally humiliation. This isn't over, he said weakly. Yes, it is, the Duke replied. And if you or anyone acting on your behalf comes near my wife again, I will destroy you. Not legally. Legally is too slow. I'll destroy your reputation, your finances, and your standing in society. I have the resources and the motivation. Don't test me. Lord Pemberton fled. The magistrate followed more slowly, pausing at the door. Your Grace, I am truly sorry about this. I was led to believe there was legitimate cause for investigation. I understand. Thank you for handling it fairly once the truth came out. When they were gone, Beatrice turned to Rosalyn, her expression stricken. I'm so sorry. I had no idea my diary would be used like that. If I'd known... It's not your fault, Rosalyn said, though her hands were still shaking. You couldn't have predicted this. I should have been more careful. I should have realized that afternoon could come back to haunt you. The Duke stepped forward. Lady Carrington, your honesty just now saved us a great deal of legal trouble. We're in your debt. Beatrice managed a small smile. No debt necessary. Rosalyn is my friend. I wasn't going to let that horrible man use me to trap her. She squeezed Rosalyn's hand. I'm glad you found someone who actually deserves you. After Beatrice left, Rosalyn sank onto the sofa, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving her exhausted. That was too close, she said. The Duke sat beside her, pulling her against his side. But it's over now, truly over. Pemberton won't try again. He knows I meant what I said about destroying him. Your mother's work, you think? Mrs. Pemberton forging the documents? Undoubtedly, though I doubt we'll ever prove it. She's too smart to leave evidence. So she just gets away with it? For now. But she's lost, Rosalyn. You're beyond her reach. That's what matters. Rosalyn leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. I keep waiting for something else to go wrong, for someone else to try to tear us apart. They can try all they want. We're stronger than they think. Are we? We survived Lady Ashby's poison, your mother's schemes, Pemberton's desperate attempts. We're still here, aren't we? She tilted her head back to look at him. When did you become an optimist? When I married a woman who refused to let me wallow in pessimism. He kissed her forehead. Come on. We need to send word to my solicitor about pressing charges against Mrs. Pemberton for fraud. And then I'm taking you riding. You've been cooped up in this house dealing with other people's nonsense for too long. The afternoon ride through the grounds was exactly what Rosalyn needed. The Duke had given her a spirited mare that made her work to keep up with his gelding, and by the time they stopped by the stream at the edge of the property, she was breathless and laughing. "You're reckless on horseback," the Duke observed, dismounting. "Says the man who just jumped that fallen tree. That was calculated risk. You just charged at it hoping for the best. And we both made it over, so what's the difference?" He helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "The difference is you're going to give me a heart attack if you keep riding like that. I thought you didn't believe in feelings. I'm making an exception for terror. You've earned it." They sat by the stream, the horses grazing nearby. The afternoon sun was warm, the sound of running water soothing. For the first time in weeks, Rosalyn felt something close to peace. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked. "All of it? The schemes, the attempts to invalidate our marriage? I think your mother is recovering and realizing the consequences of her actions. I think Pemberton is humiliated and won't risk further embarrassment. I think Lady Ashby's rumors have been thoroughly debunked after last night's gathering." He plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. "So yes, I think the worst is behind us. And ahead of us is just life. Together. Whatever that looks like." Rosalyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "I like the sound of that. Even though I'm terrible at emotions and you're reckless and we're both still figuring out how to be married, especially because of that." They stayed by the stream until the sun started to sink toward the horizon, then rode back slowly, neither of them in a hurry to return to the house and its responsibilities. That night, after dinner, the Duke led Rosalyn to a room she'd never seen before. A small parlor on the third floor with walls lined with portraits. "My family," he explained, "going back 6 generations." He stopped in front of a portrait of a man who looked unsettlingly like him. Same sharp features, same storm-gray eyes, but with a warmth in his expression that the Duke rarely showed. "My father," he said quietly. "This was painted before everything fell apart, before the bad investments and the debts and the slow destruction of everything we'd built." Rosalyn studied the portrait. "He looks happy." He was. Too happy, maybe. Too willing to believe in the best of people, to trust his feelings over his judgment. "He married my mother because he loved her passionately, despite everyone warning him she was only interested in the title. He invested in ventures because his friends asked him to, not because they made financial sense. He gave and gave and gave, and it all came crashing down. Is that why you're afraid of becoming him?" I watched him die broken and bitter, surrounded by people who'd used him and discarded him. I was 16 and suddenly responsible for an estate that was drowning in debt, with a mother who blamed me for not being able to save it all. His voice was flat, controlled. I swore I'd never let emotion override logic again. Never let myself be vulnerable enough to be destroyed. "But you're not him, Ashford. You've already proven that." "Have I? I'm standing here telling you I love you, making the same kind of reckless emotional commitment that ruined him." "No." Rosalyn turned him to face her. "You're making a choice with full knowledge of the risks. You're choosing me while still being yourself, still maintaining your logic and control. You're not abandoning who you are. You're just allowing yourself to feel something real alongside it. That's not weakness. That's courage." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You see me differently than I see myself." "Good. Because the way you see yourself is overly harsh and completely unfair. And the way you see yourself is any better? You spent years thinking you were a burden, a bargaining chip, someone no one could really want. I'm working on changing that." "So am I." He pulled her closer. "We're both works in progress, aren't we? Beautifully imperfect works in progress." He kissed her then, soft and slow, and when they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For pushing past all the walls I put up. For making me want to be better than I thought I could be. You were always better than you thought. You just needed someone to show you." 3 months later, Rosalyn sat in the library with a letter from Louisa in her hands, smiling at her sister's breathless descriptions of her first season in London. The Duke had paid for everything, the wardrobe, the coming-out ball, even a small townhouse for Louisa and their father, so they wouldn't have to rely on their mother's charity. "Your sister sounds happy," the Duke observed from his desk. "She is. She says she's already received 3 proposals, though none of them meet her standards." "Good. She learned from your example." "My example was accidentally vowing to marry whoever walked through a gate." "Your example was refusing to settle for less than you deserved." Rosalyn set down the letter, moving to stand behind his chair, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. "How's the estate business?" "Tedious as always, though the new investments are performing well. We should be ahead by year's end." "Look at you, being optimistic about finances." "It's realistic, not optimistic." "Keep telling yourself that." He pulled her around to sit on his lap, his arms circling her waist. "I have a question." "Should I be worried?" "Possibly." He looked uncharacteristically uncertain. "How would you feel about children? Eventually, I mean, not immediately, but someday." Rosalyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I thought you didn't want the traditional aspects of marriage." "I didn't. But you've made me reconsider a lot of things I thought I didn't want. And the idea of a child, our child, doesn't terrify me the way it used to." "What changed?" "I did. You changed me. I started to think that maybe I wouldn't be as terrible at fatherhood as I assumed. Maybe having you as a partner would make it possible." She cupped his face in her hands. "You'd be a wonderful father, probably too serious and overprotective, but wonderful nonetheless." "Is that a yes?" "It's a someday, when we're both ready, yes." Relief flooded his features. "Good. Because I've been thinking about it for weeks and driving myself mad wondering if you'd want the same thing." "You could have just asked me weeks ago." "I could have, but then I would have had to admit I was thinking about the future in concrete terms instead of just abstract concepts. That felt dangerous." "Everything about us is dangerous. That's what makes it work." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mary entered, looking apologetic. "Your Grace, there's a visitor. Your mother, Your Grace," she said to the Duke. "She's asking to see you both." The Duke went very still. "I wasn't aware my mother knew where I lived." "She's your mother, Your Grace. She's always known." Rosalyn felt tension radiate through him. "Do you want me there?" "Yes. I need you there." They found the Dowager Duchess in the drawing room, and Rosalyn was struck by how much she looked like her son. The same sharp features, the same cold eyes. She stood when they entered, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. "Ashford, how unexpected to see you looking so domestic." "Mother, what brings you here after 5 years of silence?" "I heard rumors that you'd married. I wanted to see for myself if they were true." Her gaze shifted to Rosalyn, assessing. "So this is the infamous Duchess who reformed the cold Duke." "I didn't reform anyone," Rosalyn said evenly. "Your son was never broken." Something flickered in the Dowager's eyes. "How diplomatic. Tell me, did he warn you about me? About how I blamed him for failing to save his father's legacy? He mentioned it." "And did he mention that I was wrong?" She turned back to the Duke. "Because I was, Ashford. Spectacularly, cruelly wrong. You were a boy trying to hold together an estate your father had nearly destroyed. I should have supported you. Instead, I made everything harder." The Duke's expression was carefully blank. "Why are you here, Mother? After all these years, why now?" "Because I'm dying." She said it matter-of-factly, as if announcing the weather. "Consumption. The physicians give me 6 months at most, and I find that facing death makes one uncomfortably honest about one's failures." Rosalyn felt the Duke tense beside her. "You're dying. Don't sound so shocked. I'm 53 and I've been sick for over a year. I simply chose not to tell you because we weren't speaking and I assumed you wouldn't care." "I would have cared. Would you? Even after how I treated you?" He was quiet for a moment. "You're still my mother. Despite everything, you're still my mother." The Dowager's composure cracked slightly. "I don't deserve that grace." "No, but I'm giving it anyway." Rosalyn watched the exchange, seeing the complicated tangle of hurt and obligation and love that still existed between them. It reminded her painfully of her own relationship with her mother. "Will you stay?" the Duke asked. "There are rooms, care, whatever you need." I didn't come here for charity, Ashford. It's not charity. It's what family does. Even complicated, damaged families who've hurt each other. The dowager's eyes shone with unshed tears. You're more generous than I taught you to be. I learned it from someone else. He glanced at Rosalyn. Someone who showed me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. His mother's gaze followed his, and for the first time she smiled. A real smile that transformed her severe features into something almost warm. Then she's good for you. Don't let her get away. I have no intention of it. The dowager stayed. It was awkward at first. Years of hurt and silence didn't dissolve overnight. But slowly, carefully, something resembling a relationship began to form. The Duke visited her rooms each evening, and sometimes Rosalyn joined them, and they talked about everything and nothing, building bridges across the chasm his father's failures had created. She's not who I expected, Rosalyn said one night as they prepared for bed. No one in my family is who they appear to be, myself included. You're exactly who you appear to be. You just appear to be more complicated than people initially think. He pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. Do you ever regret it? That reckless vow in the garden, marrying a man you barely knew? Every day. He pulled back to look at her, hurt flashing across his features. She smiled. I regret that it took me so long to see what was right in front of me. I regret the time we wasted pretending this was just an arrangement. I regret not kissing you sooner. You can't regret things that hadn't happened yet. That's not how regret works. Then I'll call it retrospective impatience. Is that better? He kissed her, cutting off whatever she was going to say next. When he pulled back, his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. I'm glad you walked into that garden. I'm glad you made that vow. I'm glad I was the one who walked through that gate. Even though it was terrifying? Especially because it was terrifying. The best things usually are. 6 months later, they stood in the Blackthorn Manor chapel, the same chapel where they'd married in a cold, practical ceremony that had promised nothing but freedom and honesty. This time, they weren't alone. The Dowager Duchess had passed away 3 weeks earlier, peacefully in her sleep, with her son holding her hand. She'd lived long enough to see him happy, to reconcile some of what had been broken between them, to give him her blessing. Now, the chapel was full. Louisa was there, beaming. Beatrice and Annabel had come from London. Even Rosalyn's father had made the journey, looking uncomfortable but present. Rosalyn's mother was noticeably absent. The stroke had left her permanently weakened, and while she'd written letters asking for forgiveness, Rosalyn wasn't ready yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. That was her choice to make. But they weren't there for a funeral or another wedding. They were there for something else entirely. The Duke stood at the front of the chapel, and when the small congregation had settled, he spoke. A year ago, I married Rosalyn Thornwell in this chapel. It was a transaction, an arrangement built on necessity rather than desire. I promised her freedom, independence, and honesty. She promised me loyalty and discretion. His eyes found Rosalyn's in the crowd. She stood in the front row, her hand resting on her rounded belly, 6 months pregnant with a child neither of them had planned for but both desperately wanted. We both kept those promises, he continued, but somewhere along the way we built something more, something neither of us expected. We built a partnership, a friendship, a love that doesn't look like the stories we were told, but is real nonetheless. He gestured for Rosalyn to join him at the altar. She moved slowly, carefully, aware of all the eyes on her, on them, on the impossible thing they'd created out of cynicism and desperation. Today, we're not getting married again, the Duke said. We're renewing our vows. Not the vows society expects, not the traditional promises of obedience and duty, but our own vows, built on who we actually are. He turned to face Rosalyn fully, taking both her hands in his. I vow to continue choosing you every day, even when it's hard. I vow to be honest, even when the truth is ugly. I vow to respect your freedom, your independence, and your right to be exactly who you are without apology. I vow to love you imperfectly, but completely. Rosalyn's eyes were shining. I vow to push you when you need pushing and hold you when you need holding. I vow to never let you hide from yourself or from me. I vow to build a life with you that's ours, unconventional, complicated, and real. I vow to love you not despite your edges, but because of them. They stood there, hands clasped, promising each other things that had nothing to do with tradition and everything to do with truth. When they kissed, the small congregation erupted in applause. Afterward, there was a reception in the gardens. Nothing formal or stuffy, just food and wine and people celebrating the strange, beautiful thing Rosalyn and the Duke had built together. Lady Ashby was notably absent. The rumors she'd tried to spread had crumbled under the weight of reality. The Duke and Duchess of Grimwood were clearly, undeniably in love. Not in the sweeping romantic way novels described, but in a quieter, deeper way that was impossible to fake. "You look happy," Louisa said, finding Rosalyn near the rose bushes. "I am happy. Is that strange?" "Not strange, just different from how you looked a year ago." "A year ago I was terrified." "And now?" Rosalyn watched the Duke across the garden, deep in conversation with his solicitor about something that was probably boring and practical. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and their eyes met. He smiled, a real smile, unguarded and warm. "Now I'm still terrified," Rosalyn admitted, "but in a good way, in a way that feels like being alive instead of just surviving." "That's all any of us can ask for, really." As the sun set over Blackthorn Manor, Rosalyn found herself standing on the terrace where she'd stood so many months ago, questioning everything about her choice. The Duke joined her, his arm slipping around her waist, his hand coming to rest on her belly, where their child grew. "Do you think we'll be good at this?" she asked. "The parenting thing." "Absolutely not. We'll be terrible at it in the beginning." "That's not reassuring. But we'll figure it out. Together, just like we figured out everything else. By making mistakes and fixing them?" "Exactly." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Ashford Grimwood. I love you too, Rosalyn Grimwood, even though you're reckless and stubborn and refuse to let me wallow in pessimism." "Especially because of that?" "Yes, especially because of that." They stood together as the stars began to appear, two people who'd started as strangers bound by a reckless vow and became something neither of them had planned for. Partners, lovers, friends. Imperfect and complicated and entirely, beautifully real. The manor behind them was no longer cold and imposing. It was home, filled with light and life and the promise of more to come. Rosalyn had walked through that garden gate looking for escape and found something far better. Freedom, yes, but also connection. A man who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. A partnership built on honesty instead of illusion. The Duke had opened that gate expecting nothing and found everything. Someone who challenged him, changed him, made him want to be better than he'd thought possible. Together, they'd taken a marriage of convenience and transformed it into something that mattered. Something that would last not because it was perfect, but because it was true. And in a world full of pretty lies and false promises, truth was the most radical choice of all. They didn't live happily ever after in the fairy tale sense. They lived honestly ever after. They fought and made mistakes and learned from them. They raised their daughter, a fierce, stubborn child who had her mother's courage and her father's mind to question everything and settle for nothing less than what she deserved. Years later, when their daughter asked how they fell in love, the Duke looked at Rosalyn across the dinner table and smiled that rare, warm smile he saved just for her. "We didn't fall," he said. "We chose. Every single day we chose each other. That's better than falling. That's deliberate." And Rosalyn, holding his hand across the table, their fingers intertwined in the same unconscious way they'd been for years, nodded. "The best things always are.